Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So what's it like getting to revisit something like a full 3 decades after having like written it and performed and composed it?
The ghost comes back. Well, if this special they're doing was anything like the original, that would have been kind of strange because the original, was cheesy, had a lot of comedy, was kind of light. This is very serious subject matter in this. So it was like scoring something completely new that the Power Rangers just happened to be in. It was and it's I loved it.
Well, I mean, like so much of like the things that brought you to prominence were through Saban, and
Mhm.
it seems as though you're like a lot of it is coming back. Like I like many people while watching Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, when I heard that X-Men animated theme play ever so briefly, just about, jumped out of my seat. Like how was that for you?
Oh, it was great. I think it was that day somebody found a way to rip part of it and send it to me. So I started getting a bunch of messages about it. And like, wow, that's so incredibly cool that it's in their heads enough to do a little bit of that theme for a second. I thought it was really great.
Now, like, you have done like so much stuff over the years, but I mean, like, legitimately, like, how did you get involved with Saban and on this journey to where you are now? I mean, with Power Rangers and X-Men and all of and Dragon Ball and all of that.
Well, I'd been in some 80s bands, and one in particular that was fun was with this gal E.G. Daly, who was Pee Wee Herman's girlfriend in his movies, and she had
Oh,
a deal on A&M. But regardless, the other band I was in had the guitar player was Ron Kanan. He ended up getting a job at Saban, and in 1989, when I was so piss poor I could barely afford to eat, and I had tremendous credit card debt, and I was just trying to figure out what to do. So he called me into Saban one night and he said, can you engineer for one of our composers? And we sat around. I went to the session. We sat around for maybe 7 hours. And then the last hour, he banged out 3 cues, just very simple stuff. And I said, what do you get paid for this? He said, 150 a minute. And I said, I've got to learn about this business. So for 3 years, I just parked myself there. I was hired kind of part-time, then full-time to mix everybody else's cues. And I kept writing stuff and submitting it to producers. And they would give me really brutal notes. Like, you don't know what you're doing. You're still in songwriting format. And I said, okay. And I just kept doing it. And, maybe I got a little thing here and there in one of their direct-to-home videos. And then in came X-Men. And once that theme was written, which took a couple weeks because there were so many notes on it, there was just all I remember is more hi-hat than it was like more cowbell. It's so funny. And when that was done, from that moment on, I was a composer there. And I started just writing music full time for that show, for any other projects they had. And then in came Power Rangers, and it was great.
I always love talking to composers who kind of came from like that rock and roll background, because it always feels like there's a struggle to get started, but once you get there, you seem to have like some very interesting ideas. Because I mean, like your music, especially for Saban, is like so guitar heavy, which uh it's like these songs have been covered by like so many bands.
Yeah.
What's it like to hear a group like Power Glove or something like that, like take, the X-Men theme and turn it into just like epic prog metal?
It's amazing, especially because or with covering the Power Ranger thing or anything else, it's remarkable, especially to watch, because I did all of that on a keyboard, all those guitars. I don't play a note on guitar, and I just really know how to play each instrument on a keyboard. but it's amazing to really watch those guys when they're actually working it out and playing it. And then to hear these cover songs that are going on are just amazing. And it just goes on and on and on. It's just such an honor.
No, you've gotten to do like a lot of stuff since then, obviously. Like, I mean, you've
Yeah.
done work for like Hot in Cleveland, and you did work as a contributing composer for SpongeBob SquarePants, which I feel like just demonstrates sort of like the width and breadth of like what a composer has to do. Um, what is
Right.
like, how do you approach each new project to, obviously they're hiring because they like what you can do, but how do you find out how do you figure out what each project requires musically?
Well, usually they have a general idea of what they're going for. So they'll say uh, uh, pop theme, or in the score, orchestral or whatever. Um, so I am, just like songwriting, I'm able to look at the scene. I get it. I interpret their notes, even if the director is saying or the producer is saying, I don't know, it's something like blue. It's the oldest example in the world. But usually they have a few examples, or they'll send some YouTube videos now and say, something like this or this, even if they're completely different. So it's my job after all these years to kind of decipher what they want. And then when I look at a scene, or I'm writing a theme, I pretty much hear it instantly. And then I just have to go through the labor of getting it out of my head and make the actual recording of everything.
The temp track can be a terror for a composer. Like, how do
Yeah, I've had some.
does it, I imagine like it's nice when it's, well, this is an idea versus the, can you make it sound like this but not to where we get sued?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that a lot. And sometimes I've been pushed a little too close to the edge of what I feel could be a lawsuit. And I've backed out and said, maybe, I've got to steer away from this. And you talk them into it. Because you say, look at it this way. Is it really worth all the money and time you're going to spend in court talking about this? No, it's not. So let's just get away from it. And yes, there's times I've temped things in, the end of a show, and I'm like, what'll work. It's going to be orchestral. They need something right now. Throw in some John Williams thing. And then later they're like, can't you do that exact thing? No, I can't do the exact thing. I'll get really, I was just giving you an idea of the energy and how big this will get at the end. So it works out. But yeah, temp tracks can be a nightmare at times, especially when they get really addicted to it, what they temp in.
What like, I mean, given that you've done so much over the course of your 30 years in composing, like, what is your favorite thing to get to score? Like, is it, do you have a genre, or is it just like there are certain projects that just really speak to you?
They've all spoken to me. Some don't speak so well, but I always do my absolute best. But I like how diverse everything is. I mean, just prior to finishing up this Power Rangers thing, I'd scored a film called Stars Fell Again. Uh, and that's like light orchestral romantic comedy. So I love doing that. Prior to that, I was working more on a video game, which was kind of like speed synth style for, action. So I love how diverse it is. There is no one favorite thing. The only thing I get really jealous about are a lot of these Netflix, these dark shows, and you just have a drone, just this. And what I would give to have a minute of just a drone that evolves into another sound. But my scoring always requires more work than holding down one key. And
I mean,
I'm not dissing them. It's just I am truly jealous.
well, I mean, like, that is sort of like the thing I think that makes your work so popular for bands that get to cover them, is because of like the intricacy that they do. Is that something that comes from your background in being a band, or is that something that you've just come to as a way to differentiate yourself?
Well, when I was in bands, I'd always end up sort of taking over and becoming the main writer and the producer and the engineer. But over the years, and doing a lot of demos for singers, working out their songs they want to present to labels, dealing with a lot of musicians, and the nightmare of dealing with a lot of musicians that never show up prepared for anything. So I remember I could go to any club in LA in the late 80s, and I specifically went every night I could and just watched drummers for maybe a couple weeks or a month, then just bass players, then just guitar players, and focused on how to play each instrument, all the really good musicians in town. And that saved me a ton of time when I was doing all these demos. So it's the path has always, you look back and you say, why would anybody do that? Well, it was so I could play everything. So when they walked in and said, we need a theme, I could do something in a couple hours or just an evening and get the basic idea, because I know what the bass player would do. I know what the drummer would do.
Working in a studio versus working in your home as a composer, like how do you balance those two things where you're just like making stuff and then sending it and getting notes versus like that sort of instant feedback that comes with working, in a studio where quote unquote time is money?
Yes. Well, that is a lot of pressure, especially when you think you've completed a show and you're on the mix stage and you have a laptop and a little 25 key keyboard, and they're 5 minutes from the end of the mix, and they say, let's roll back to that one cue. Could you do something a little different there? And you have to go find a quiet, unused office at Warner Brothers, let's say, and sit in there and compose something very quickly. But I work great under excruciating deadlines. The bigger the deadline, the better I am. I cannot work on stuff that's just, if somebody says, I don't know, it doesn't matter if you do it in a month or 3 months, I don't really need it maybe till later this year. I need to feel that kind of stress. At home, though, I have been working at home since I left Saban pretty much. And of course, delivery's gotten easier. So I prefer it. I really prefer it, as opposed to driving and being in an environment where I can be interrupted, or I don't need the instant notes. They get back to me plenty fast.
That's wonderful. So I always like to end these conversations by asking folks, like, because I know they're always very excited about the current project, but almost more excited about what they have next. Is there anything you're in the middle of working on that you can talk about?
Still working on the video game, The Next World, which is, he's been developing it for 5 years. He hires artists, but it's amazing. It looks like a huge studio did it. And I think he's debuting the trailer in a couple days. I actually have to give him a call and find out what's going on with that. I've got that, and then now 3 other things I can't discuss that hopefully will happen.
Well, that is absolutely excellent. I'm looking forward to all of them as well.
Yeah, more is coming.
As well as the Power Rangers coming soon. Ron, I wanted to thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. I really
Thank you so much. Thanks, Nick.
You're very welcome. Have a good rest of your day, sir.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.